Welcome back, sports fans. This is Moving the Needle podcast, and we are race fans. You know that at heart. And this is your Crank Brothers race review. We've been breaking down an epic World Cup season. We had the world champs last week. Where Crank Brothers, man, they just keep doing it. 14 years in a row, they've won that world championship title, both in the male and the female. And then this week, I think they went top 5 men, top 5 women. No surprise in the muck, the mess that is Loudenvielle. I mean, that race every year just does not disappoint for drama. I would say it just brings a lot of drama, but it brings excitement. It brings crashes. It brings standout rides. It brings people that are battling with form, but when they throw caution to the wind, they can get a result. So, Alan Milway, welcome to the show, Crank Brothers ambassador as well. You were on site. You were dealing with what, from the outside, looks like a really, really stressful week with a condensed schedule, weather changing all the time. I mean, that just is so tough to manage.
That's exactly it, Andrew. It's been very challenging. I'd say that was probably the word to sum it up. A lot of challenges for us, a lot of changes in the schedule, a lot of having to adapt. And I think there's a lot of positives that can come from this race, and riding in the mud is one of them. We need races in the mud, and it's a skill set and it's a challenge. But there was also a lot of difficulties for the teams. If I'm honest with you, quite a lot of frustration around the paddock. Some issues that should have been addressed from last year and weren't. Simply, that's the fact. And it just made our life quite difficult. So we're sort of drying off and brushing the mud off today.
Yeah, that is a tough one. It's an unbelievable track, and then obviously some of the issues were brought to light last year, like access for medics, spectators, team support. Yeah, that really is a challenge because I'm sure everyone is trying to do their best thing, and then money's involved. There's like so many bits of red tape, but the glaring issues you would hope they can get addressed. And I guess, I mean, obviously the theme of the day is weather on an incredible track. That's like the big positive, actually. Yes, weather sounds like a negative. But with the weather brought, what I guess the biggest frustration is them having this condensed schedule, lots of riders, which the organizers have spoken about. The other thing which keeps coming up is we've got a junior category. Now, like it or not, it's there. Agree with it or not, it is there. Other sports have, other categories. I'm at the point that obviously Worlds is a longer week, so it probably costs more. And then devil's advocate, you can then space the schedule out to maybe have more time to make changes and have these sort of issues come about. But I guess with a condensed schedule set on paper, is that then you're forced to make these changes on the fly and lose a practice schedule and all those things. It's like a byproduct of having a tight schedule.
I don't know. I fear I'm a little bit more cynical than you, Andrew. If we were in a different sport or a different industry, let's imagine we're in the military. You plan an exercise, you plan for dry weather, and then you've got your plan B. What happens if it rains? What happens if the vehicles get stuck? What happens if Private Jones gets injured? You make these plans. And at the start, you said last year there was issue with access. There was issue with, medics. That was raised last year. There was nothing changed. So there was no improvement for access. There was no improvement for medics. There was no improvement trackside. None of those changes and those things that ultimately forced the cancellation of the junior race were implemented. And practice, to give people a bit of an overview, we have 2 practice sessions on the first day. We've got A practice and B practice. B practice has a couple of hours, then A practice. And then in the afternoon, it repeats, but it's a timed session. And what they decided was after that morning practice, they decided there would be no afternoon practice at all. And that was to preserve the track and allow the track to be worked on. So we sort of understood that. And we're like, fine, there's some big problems. The bottom berm that you would have seen before what is now a bridge over the double, that was a complete mess. You couldn't even really get around that corner. And first thing in the morning, we were expecting updates. Right, what's happened? What have you done to the track? And they said, you need to wait for your updates. Everything was pushed back again to allow track maintenance. And I went up there and nothing had been done. The same tire tracks that were there the day before were still there. And my understanding from a reliable source is that there were 6 track builders working on the track, and that's all. And they were patting down mud, they weren't scraping it off. And you just could tell straight away we're going to have the same problem. So during that practice session, unfortunately, they had to red flag the practice for 15, 20 minutes to allow them to work on the track. So a lot of riders and teams were very frustrated because we were saying, well, why did you cancel all the afternoon practice? Surely you should have had an army of people up there, modifying the track, scraping it off. And they ended up building a bridge over the double because it wasn't clearable at the very end, but didn't tell anyone. That wasn't communicated to riders. And I had to reach out to the organization to say, you need to tell the riders you've now put, essentially a bridge over this double. And they were like, well, why? Why do we need to? Really? Do we really need to do that? And I was like, yeah, you really do. Because unless you've got staff on track updating you personally, you're going to come into that final corner and go, whoa, there's a big change here. What's going on? So I think that caused some real concerns. And without turning this into a monologue, I think reaching back to your point on the juniors, the poor juniors, they practiced in the worst conditions and their race was at the end of the day. And the track was dusty. I did a track walk with a whole load of elite men. There was a big group of us walking down the track together, and we were sidelined, and it was dry tires. So they practiced in probably flat pedals and spikes and raced on dry tires and clips. It was very, very tricky for them, very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that they didn't want to cancel the junior race, so then the juniors had to qualify. But I would have, I don't know, without being there, I was like, shucks, maybe we should just cancel the junior qualifying, allowed more practice, and had like a little bit more of a schedule. Again, look, it's coming up ad nauseum, and I appreciate what you're sharing, because I guess we all watch the broadcast. We all see amazing riders racing, and I guess that to me is also the story. Like, I can't believe how adaptable professional sportsmen are, and team managers and mechanics. Like, isn't that the story? Is like everyone was thrown curveballs. I'm not going to get too into nitty-gritty because I wasn't there. It's just not fair for me. But like, it's just like so many curveballs, from weather, from maybe understaffed, from not predicting the weather, like whatever it may be. There's always a reason behind it. And you guys all delivered an amazing race for me at home to watch and go, thank goodness I don't have to be at the top stressing about how much rain has come down this track, because you heard it from all the riders. They were like, yeah, I saw it in my mechanic's eyes that it was really raining, because I couldn't quite tell from inside the tent. So I know that feeling. That feeling is it's really tough. But what it does is it lets the cream rise to the top of like, okay, we got to get on with this. What can we control? What can we do? And it's just amazing to see the speed, the sheer speed that all those riders, everyone that competed in varying conditions, were able to deliver, to predict, to look ahead, to guess, to go, it's going to be wet. I don't know. That's probably a section that I should be more cautious. And there were riders that probably, it seemed like a little bit, it was 50-50. Sometimes I go, oh, was it the inexperience that the guy pushed in that section? Or was he just unlucky,
Yeah. There's so many things around this. And like you were saying, in terms of didn't realize how bad the weather was, I was talking to Oisin afterwards, and he was saying that he had his headphones on, he was listening to his music in the warm-up tent at the top, and we got obviously he had feedback from how wet the track was and his phone was pinging off, so he was understanding the conditions. And they were saying it's raining quite heavy down here. But he's listening to his music, so he's in the zone warming up. And apparently he said he finished his warm-up, he took his headphones off, and all he could hear was the rain banging on the top of the tent. So he was like, right, okay, it really is raining. But normally we'd expect, and you'll have seen this at Fort William, you've got a warm-up area, and then before the start hut, there's another sort of tented off area so you can be in the dry waiting for your run. We didn't have that here. So using Oisin as this example, he comes out of the warm-up tent and he's standing there, and his mechanic's trying to keep him dry. They're maybe trying to change tires. And a lot of the riders were saying they sort of came out into this no man's land, absolutely soaking wet before they even got into the start hut. And the top of the track went from being very, very hard and fast. And then the rain started to come down and it formed that slick surface, that's just like grease.
Yes.
And
I had that in my notes. Like, there's so much icy conditions in between.
yeah, so many ice. And I'd say, if I'm honest, Tane, the only positive that's in my view with these conditions was it was pretty much fair for everyone apart from for Tane. So I feel for Tane.
I saw that she got absolutely hosed.
Yeah, she had the worst of it, and her race was a write-off. Poor girl. You know, she didn't have a chance to fight because the girls have really consistent conditions, and then it absolutely started to hammer down, and that was it. She was in the worst of it on the ice. But she was really, I don't know if it's magnanimous, I can't forget the word. She was really gracious in that situation, because she said to me at the bottom that she suffered in those conditions, but then she got lucky the day before with the reruns, because the girls, there was a red flag on the track. Cami had crashed, and there was 9 girls that got a chance to rerun. And it's, again, due to the decision of the organisers, they decided to put those reruns right at the end of the day. So you had a wet track in the morning that the girls were riding on, and the reruns all happened in the bone dry. And it was just, that was very unfair. A lot of girls really suffered because the track was completely different. So Millie missed out, Gracie missed out, I think Jess Blewett missed out, quite a few. And that was a real shame. And I think it was good of Tane to almost acknowledge that these conditions play into someone's hands and you win, and then they play into someone's hands and you lose. And that was a real shame. But to see the men's race follows almost immediately from the women's, and by that point, Charlie was the first man down, and he was absolutely covered, you know, and then Greg was down, he was absolutely covered. And then you're like, you know what, we're in a fair fight here. No one can put an asterisk by the winner and go, hey, he got better conditions. It varied. So it was exciting for the men's, and Coulanges' run was, you could just straight away, you're like, I can't see anyone beat.
No, that was impressive. If I can put just a pause on that. So yes, Tani got absolutely the worst of it all, and that's really, there's so many good sportsmanship stories from this race as well. Like everyone in it together. Like you brought up the military. Like, it is like going to war. It feels that traumatic when you got to deal with all these changing conditions. And yes, it's just a bike race, but it's your livelihood. It's all you know. And so yeah, there was the challenge of the rerun. So that's really good that she made everyone aware, even though from what I could see in the videos, she was riding at an incredible pace. Like, she's got her confidence back.
Yeah, absolutely.
To me, those conditions are like, and it'll bleed into Benoît, is like, they're like Leger, Morzine, Plenty, Steeps, the illegals.
Yeah.
And that was awesome to see. But maybe we break it down. The reason it's so icy, we call it icy, we call it slippery. Like, if you ever put water on a hard surface, there's no grip. So that track, when it bakes in the sun, gets a lot of hard surfaces. Then the rain comes on top of it, super, super greasy. Then after more and more riders do the hard work of cutting it in, then it's rideable again.
Yeah.
So Tane could not get down that hill. You could barely see rain at the top, but then at the bottom, as you said, with Ocean, is like, yes, it was raining at the top, but it was really raining at the bottom.
Yeah.
So as you progress down the track, it got even worse. So I was like, what's going on? Like, is she riding tight? And I'm like, nope, that's an ice rink.
Yeah.
And then you could start seeing the water droplets in the camera, but only further down. But as you said, by the time Charlie came down, what a run. Like, you don't know what on earth the track's going to be like. There were just puddles everywhere. Gwyn said he's never had wetter shoes in his life because there was all the puddles before the jumps. So now you're spraying that all up into your goggles. And that's if you had dry goggles before the start. Like, if anyone's ever ridden in the rain, they know what happens with, obviously, water on the goggles. But tear-offs, if you get water between the tear-off pack and your lens, doesn't matter how many tear-offs you go for, or roll-offs. Yeah. If you have a bad system, I think he pulled goggles off, I think. So, like, geez, there's so many variables. And, yeah, you feel for Tani. But, you know, Myriam, you can't take anything away from her. I mean, that is an inspired ride as well, which I think she didn't even expect.
I was really excited to see that.
But it makes sense. This is like her type of track, right? The technical, the difficult, the gnarly, but doing it in front of the French fans, that's a lot of pressure. And yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy for her. I mean, for so many of these riders that have bounced back into the podium circle or the winner's circle.
it was really good. It was lovely to see Myriam put in a really good run. She'd been riding really well all week, and there was a few girls that were standing out in the wet as being composed and sort of carry momentum. On a wet track, especially in practice, we saw this. There's a lot of people that can carry speed on the straight, but it's hard to carry speed through a corner. And you need to be well balanced, and you need to get your braking correct. And if you get your braking correct, you can carry exit speed. So it's not really about the entry speed into a section. It's about the exit speed and carrying that momentum. And you could see she was looking really good. Obviously, Valley was looking really good as well. And Gracie was looking really good in the wet. And so you could see there were some girls that were going to do well. But as the track dried, Myriam was able to push on again. And I think Valley looked very frustrated with her run. She crossed the line, and there was sort of no acknowledgement that was a half decent run. So I think she's probably very frustrated. But Myriam took advantage of that. She put in a really good run, and she won. And it's lovely to see. For me, that's the sort of culmination of the return. Because last year she came to this race as a spectator. She came, I think, with her psychologist, and it was part of the recovery process was to get back to a race and to sort of go through what it's like being at a race. And I remember vividly having a conversation with her by the start height in the blazing sun, and she was sat next to a girl that I hadn't realised I think was her psychologist. And so if you fast forward 12 months, it must be very rewarding for her to have gone through a 12-month progressive process and then find herself on the top step of the podium. So hats off to her and her team. That Common Cell team do a fantastic job. They've got a great support network. And, to see her and Anne-Marie come that full circle from big injury to success is lovely. And I think everyone on that team should have a big pat on the back.
Yeah, and it just shows you should never give up. And the sport, I mean, it just knocks you down a lot more than it, bigs you up. It really does seem that. There's a few riders that are maybe, going against that rule, but it's so cool to see. And like you say, you've got to get down the hill. You're not going to feel your best each week. I mean, that's where champions are born. Like, still a good ride for Valley. Like, is the title hunt in the back of her mind? Like, if I was in that position, I would probably hope to wrap it up before the final round. Like, having to sit on the lead for another 3 weeks and worry like what's going to happen. So in both men's and women's, it seems like subconsciously they may have protected that lead. And Loïc's looked a lot more smooth than, say, Valley's run. Valley maybe was riding tight, maybe wasn't gelling with the conditions, maybe needed more runs. There's all these things that maybe she's not even aware of that play into that. You're not going to feel your best on the bike every day, even at this level.
You're not. And like you were saying with the title hunt, that's something that adds a big element to this. You can't necessarily ride freely. And I was quite surprised that bear in mind, they've had this is not a criticism. I'm surprised that they decided not to tell Loïc that Anne-Marie had crashed, because I had wondered whether that would be information that would be fed back.
But he mentioned he did know though. So I don't know if he saw it.
Well, maybe he did know, but I think what I'm saying is he didn't know that he'd wrapped up the overall when he crossed the line. And maybe he had got the information, Anne-Marie's crash, get yourself down consistently. You don't need to absolutely go for the win. Yes. And maybe that's what happened, because it felt as though from the interview that I saw, it sounded like he was unaware of the situation he was in. And then he was told on camera that he wrapped it up. But what we were discussing that I thought was fascinating was that the top until the first split is pretty flat. Okay, it's a relatively flat track, and there's a lot of jumps in there, and you could almost see the specialized magic button coming into play on that part of the track, adding that compression, speeding the bike up probably and firing the bike out. That bike was incredibly fast on that top half of the track. And then when it came into the steeps, it all leveled up again. And I thought that it was quite interesting to see the way the bikes were working and the corners that were becoming problematic, because there was a corner that seemed to have got a lot worse after this sort of, I call it the sort of Daytona wall jump, where they sort of the riders sky out totally. After the whoops.
Off camber right after that.
Yeah, after that, because that took out Ronan crashed there, Loris crashed there. The crashes just on the left hand after that took out Danny, and they took out Amory, and
Yeah.
it was, I could understand the off camber, and it was just the way it fed you into that next left-hander was it was a section we looked at on track walk, but on track walk it was bone dry, so you could see a line that was ridden in the wet wasn't really beneficial. You came back to a dry line, and it showed that in the wet, that's where these races are so exciting. Danny laid the bike down. He didn't get up that quickly, and he ended up 12th, I think. And then Ronan laid it down again in that corner and still got on the podium. So the average speed, if you could have high track speed on those wet tracks, it's never over, is it? You can make a big mistake, but it's never over. And I think that is, for me, really exciting. And for a spectator, I obviously don't hear the commentary, but I hope that that's explained. These are the conditions that are the great leveler. In the dry race, if you lay the bike down, that's it, you're done. You're probably 30th. Those crashes would have put Ronan, Danny, Amory 30th straight away. But in the wet, it's not over. You can still claw back position.
Yeah, I noticed that section looks super tricky because you're coming off such a high speed section. Then you've got to consciously tone it down. You're obviously carrying maybe a little bit more speed because it's a race run. You haven't seen that section. And then the other thing is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, like a lot of times the wet weather ruts are not what you want to ride in the dry, but because you've hammered a track in the wet, then it's baked. There's a lot of ruts that are going to be pointing the wrong direction or not as optimum, right? And then it gets wet again, and you're a little bit late on that off camber because the rut's not good or you were cautious. And then you're late into that left. Like Amory seemed like he might have just been like super unlucky, a little bit late. It looked so icy when he tipped it into the left. Then Ronan, you could argue, probably being Ronan, like going a little bit too fast in a section, you could probably be cautious. Loïc, you could see how cautious he was. Loris, also a bit aggressive. Full-on racing incidents. So, but exactly, like the reason they're so exciting is it's not over till it's over in a wet race. It's like crashes could come at any time if you have a crash, but then you get super aggressive after that and you stay on, you can make up so much time, because a clean run in the wet looks good, but if someone's aggressive and happens to stay on, they wallop you by a few seconds. You saw the time gaps are way bigger, and that's what makes it so exciting. So those are great honorable mentions. There were a lot of guys that were going good that had crashes that couldn't get up in time, but Danny, inspiring ride. We kind of, every time there's a wet race, everyone thinks back to over a decade ago, is it going to happen again? And it kind of half did. And he got going, he got 12th. And then Ronan, he just throws caution to the wind after a crash like that. And his was like a quick tip over. And I always wonder, like, will the rider ride as quick if he didn't crash there?
Well,
I've made mistakes where I just ride like an absolute lunatic. Sometimes you override it and it's worse. And sometimes you just get away with that aggression and you're like, wow, what would happen if I didn't crash? But it's like, but if you didn't crash, would you have gone as hard? It's such a funny, fine line.
It's really hard because a couple of examples that are sort of weird, I guess, but I remember taking my driving test and making a mistake in my driving test and thinking I'd failed it. I was like, well, that's the driving test done now. I may as well just get on with it. And then I passed the driving test with, that was my only mistake and it was my only minor. And it was just because I relaxed. I thought, well, the game's up. But the flip side of that is maybe if you think about you're a big golfer, if you cock up a hole, you get a double bogey and you go to the next hole, you're like, right, I need to make birdie on this next hole. So you try and take a really adventurous shot or an aggressive shot or overhit something and you make another mistake and it just spirals. So you have to somehow go, well, that was the mistake, done. Now let's just carry on. And Ronan was up to speed so quickly. I don't know if you saw his GoPro preview run, but it was phenomenal. And I feel conflicted with some of the things that were adjusted with the track. For example, the very last jump, that berm was useless. It was built 2 weeks ago, I think. It was too soft. It caused a lot of accidents and crashes when it wasn't scraped. And because no one could actually get over that jump, they built a platform so you could just hop on and hop off like a tabletop. But imagine your advantage if you could get that jump right. So Bernard Kerr cleared that jump in the worst conditions. Oisin cleared that jump in the worst conditions. Ronan cleared that jump in the worst conditions. And other riders couldn't even get over it, couldn't even roll up the face. So you're almost denying someone's ultimate skill set. You're sort of leveling the playing field again by going, you know what, we'll put a bridge in here. So maybe it should have been a beeline. Maybe they should have put the bridge around the outside. So if you were going to go for the jump, there was a way over, but there was still an advantage for you if you were going to suck up and go for it.
That's a fair point, because course changes and stuff over the years are often like, well, we don't want to make the course easier for everyone if some people are able to ride it. So then it comes down sometimes to safety, maybe a bit more predictability, or like, I didn't like when it was so inconsistent that you could lose a race in a 2-second section, and it was like it was a lottery, but what I'm hearing is, if people could use their skill to get through something to then clear a jump, what do? If it's not dangerous for the rest of the field, then maybe, like you say, it needed to be a beeline. So that's, it's, geez, dude, that's such catch-22, isn't it? But I like where your head's at. And I'm sure certain riders are like, damn, I was fine with that. Why did you make it easier if it wasn't dangerous? If it's dangerous, that's another thing. So, yeah, that's super fascinating. Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from Ronan. Like, between him and Reese, they looked up to pace before the race even started. Like, it's just some guys lick their chops at this type of track. And then you got someone like Gwyn who's like openly saying he didn't want it to rain. Like, is he going to be as confident in the rain? Probably not after that long off. But wow, but someone like him, it's all attitude in the rain. It's all like, I can't change what the weather's doing. Like, I want to ride in the rain, and that's half the time it's a UK guy or a French guy. Like, they're so used to the conditions. So, but really inspiring ride by someone like Gwyn, been out for, feels like 2 years. Yeah, I guess it is. It's like the whole of last year and basically the whole of this year. Limited practice, varying conditions, and he gets it into the final. I mean, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
And then maybe he's open to admitting, like, at the current time, he's not going to be confident in varying conditions and wet. Like, he's not feeling that. And then, he didn't have a greatest race versus someone like Reese Wilson, who said, I want it to rain. And then it rains, and he's like, oh dear, I better back up my statement.
Well, we need to talk about Reese, don't we? Because he's had an extended period of not racing and injury and recovery. And I think things are going to be changing for him next year with the teams, I'm sure. And for him to come into this weekend and want to make a statement, he's also a really creative rider in terms of his line choice. I sometimes wonder whether Reese takes the alternative line for the sake of taking the alternative line. And it's like, hey, no one's going to do this, so I'm going to do this. But he adapted really well to the conditions. And in the morning practice, he crashed on a really strange section. He sort of missed, he came out of a berm just before it was the penultimate split 3. And to see, he sort of missed the turn and just went up into the bushes. And that was probably his last practice run. And then it absolutely pours your brain. And he was one of the riders that I think went back to a wet line. Just as you were mentioning earlier, before the very steep section, there was like a high and a low traverse. And he dropped onto the low and went through the rut and through the puddle and absolutely hosed down a marshal. I don't know if you saw that. It was really funny. He just absolutely
great clip.
Yeah, great clip. And I like the adaptability is just what you were mentioning. They must have been on the turbo trainer warming up and just shut their eyes and taken themselves to a place where they're visualizing, what do I need to do? Am I changing inside or outside? Am I going high or low? And these top riders, they almost don't need to practice, practically what they're about to do. As long as they can visualize in their head what's about to happen and they can see themselves doing it and go, yeah, I can see myself being able to do that. They can adapt really quickly. And I don't know Reese and I don't know his process, but from the outside looking in, I think he did that very well this weekend. And it was amazing to see he carried a lot of speed. He's been looking brilliant and confident this week and making some big gaps and jumps and hitting stuff early. And then for him to back that up that's got to be just the best feeling to go. It sort of like, yes, I am able to do this. I have proved people wrong. I am back at the top. Fair play to him. That'd be really nice moving into Mont Saint Anne, and probably gives him a little confidence for 2025 already. Just straight away, he's like, okay, cool, I can do this. I'm sorted.
Yeah, I mean, the emotion he showed on the podium. I mean, if one of the interviews he said he wasn't sure if he was going to race again, like, with that injury, or maybe with keep getting knocked down with these other injuries like his shoulder. Like every time he felt back up to speed and trying to get confidence, he'd get knocked down with kind of an unlucky crash as well. So yeah, I mean, you just always want to see guys with that sort of talent, with that work ethic, just the pure resilience that Reece clearly has. And most of these riders have that. But just to see it, and then not to just get back in the mix, like to put it on the podium in tough conditions. Yeah, all credit to him, and that'll help him if things are changing from what you're saying. Like there are a lot of rider roster changes we're hearing about. There's potential changes to the structure of teams and all sorts of things. So it's really a good time to throw that result in. It's always great to have a result at the end of a year, especially if you're in a contract year, just regardless if you're renewing or maybe going somewhere else. But it just makes me think back to between him, Benoît, maybe a Danny, who are very instinctual, are obviously very talented, and they enjoy riding in the mud. So if you're having fun, you're normally going well. If you're having fun on your bike and you're making do. But when you ride practice runs in Leger, in the steeps, I keep going back to where Benoît calls home, and he's there a lot. You could see it. It's like you don't think about lines there. You're just riding on instinct, like, okay, I'm a little bit hot, get on the brakes, try get some exit speed. Okay, I'm not on a line now, but I know I got to get there. Like you're just riding a lot more on instinct and sort of making it up as you go along. Yes, there's a plan. Yes, they're visualized. But I think they got on with it. They really did. Like they focused on their exit speed. They focused on braking early before like the treacherous bits. And then some of those lines that these guys took, it was like, if you were able to commit and keep the momentum up, the track looked easier. And that's easier said than done from sitting here. Does that make sense? Like the guys that kept momentum made it look like a different track.
Well, you make a very good point. And my role on a race weekend is normally on the hill analysing lines, feeding back to riders. And in the mornings, I'll make sure the schedule's sorted and everything's prepared and they've got what they need. And we had discussions during practice at the start. And because it was so wet and it was in ruts, there was very little nuance to the track. There's no point me saying, you know what, I think maybe a highline here, because there was no highline. There was the rut, and it was your commitment on the track. And I felt as though the first part of the week, I was much more value to the riders, helping them be ready. So I was preparing goggles. I was trying to find flat shoes for Gracie, because Gracie had to practice in flats because it was that bad. And then I had to go back up on track to show the changing conditions, so that when it came to her qualifying run, I said, you know what, you're going to have to put the clips back on because it's dried out too much. And the way the track was changing, we had to adapt to say, well, it's going to a dry track, right? We now need to look at the nuance of the track. Where can we change? Where can we carry a bit more momentum? And then the rain comes and you almost have to revert back to day one lines and go, okay, we're going back to this. So it was trying to be on your toes as much as possible. And we were going back and forth. And I hate to say it, but I think I'm very, very good at building Oakley roll-offs now. If anyone needs a pair of Oakley roll-offs building, come speak to me. I've got it dialed.
Haven't you got enough jobs?
You know what?
Haven't you got enough?
I've got too
jobs?
much going on, but the two things I really like doing are cleaning shoes and building goggles. So if you see me in the pits, I like a nice clean pair of shoes and I like a nice pair of goggles. So I'm the first man to jump in and say, hey, let me help you build them. But I feel as though from a rider's point of view, if you can have a fresh pair of goggles all built up, you know they're going to work, you know they're not going to bind, you know that you've got clear vision, and again, you've got everything sorted for you, fresh gloves, fresh shoes, all of that stuff we were trying to keep on top of, because Greg explained it really well to Gracie. He said, look, you need to ride with a smile on your face. It's as simple as that. It's a bit of a battle out there, but if you go into it with a sort of aggressive mentality, or you feel beaten down by the weather, you're cold, you look at the negative, because you can easily find the negative in wet, cold weather. The gondola drops you off probably a 5-minute road ride down to the track. You get hosed down with water, you're soaking wet before you even start. If you let that get to you, you're not going to ride your best. If you can put a big smile on your face and go, let's just enjoy getting muddy, you're going to do better. And that, I think Ronan is the personification of that attitude. He's like, F it, I'm just going to go and have fun. And if you can take that almost childlike enjoyment of riding, and you see kids sliding around in the mud all the time playing, they don't care. You almost need to bring that back to your riding. And it's very easy when it's not a race, but when it's a race and everything counts, maybe you feel as though you have to be more serious. And I don't think that really helps in the lap.
Oh man, you've just got the social clip of the year, right? With a smile on your face, and maybe you have to force, but that's great advice. And I remember back to wet races, and they're draining. They're mentally draining, as you said, they're always changing. Then physically draining, it's often more effort, and a lot of the sections run slower, so practice is harder. You're cold. Then you got to deal with your kit. You want, like you say, you want dry kit, you want dry gloves, you're going through a lot of kit. And it's almost like you've just got to block out how much mess you're creating. And that's Monday's problem. And just use as much kit as you can. And that's where staff comes in. And that's where these factory teams have an edge. Definitely, like to be a privateer at a wet race it's insane. You often don't have enough kit. You don't have a mechanic. I'm hearing there were teams having e-bikes right at the finish. Jump on the e-bike. You don't want to pedal like a dirty downhill bike, even back to the pits. It's a waste of energy. So it's all about energy conservation, and then attitude, I think, is at the top, like you said. A Danny Hart, a Ronan, a Reese. Yes, they're used to these conditions, but they lap it up. They're like, this is where I excel, and it is that. It's to ride like a kid again. It's to be creative. It's to make mistakes, and you don't have to be precise to win that race. There was going to be no clean run that wins the race. Benoît felt he left time out there. He said it. So that's so important. It's just all about attitude, and Benoît, we can't say enough about how nice a guy he is, and to see him back in the winner's circle. And I just thought, it's no surprise. He rode that thing, like I've said ad nauseum here, the plenty steeps, like he was on a afternoon run with the boys, It's really, really special. And he even said track conditions probably changed. It's probably harder for the guys behind him. Like, he's so humble. He's like, you can't even say if I had the best conditions or the worst. He felt like he had better conditions than some. I don't know. Some sections, yes, some sections not. Like one will never know.
No, and I don't think he should be thinking that, because it was give and take. The visibility at the top for some of the riders was awful, and you came over a little flat bridge and you went into a couple of doubles, and if you couldn't see what you were doing, that you'd obviously resist. But if there's a lot of rain coming down, it almost keeps a little bit more flow in those conditions. But when the rain stops and the visibility gets better, hey, I can see where I'm going, but the mud's getting a bit stickier, so it's a bit slower. So it is give and take. And I think, Benoît, from what you were saying, when you are going to leave time out on a track when it's muddy, it's not a Formula One dry asphalt, and you're not going to get perfection. And I think the secret is for a rider not to aim for perfection in these conditions, but aim for excellence. You can still be excellent all the way down the track. You might make a mistake, you might mess something up, but you can go, okay, I'm going to be excellent for the rest of it. But if you aim for perfection, as soon as you've made that mistake, you think, oh, well, that's gone. I need the perfect run to win. And I don't think you do need the perfect run to win. It's very, very rare that you will see someone with splits that are 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 all the way through, and they've made the perfect theoretical time. And we do see, we do learn that. We learned that in Andorra last weekend, and we're learning it again. But it's the maturity to know where that line is and to go, let's have fun, but this bit is a bit sketchy, so maybe back it down. Maybe don't do the risky line. There are a few risky lines on this track where I was timing a gap jump, and there was 2 different gaps you could do, but also a line where you kept your wheels on the floor. And the wheels on the floor is not very sexy. It looked very normal. But when you timed it and when you split screened it, you're like, you know what? They're not losing anything here. And it really isn't risky. And Benoît was one of those. Benoît and Andy Kolb, interestingly, both were taking the low, less aggressive line. And I think that's something that maybe riders should reflect on. You know, it's not, downhill racing shouldn't be an ego trip. It's not a rampage style event. You're not trying to do the biggest jump or the scariest line. You're trying to get from top to bottom as fast as you possibly can within the tapes. And if there's a line within the tapes that's fast, but maybe not so Instagrammable, then maybe you should still take it.
Yeah, I mean, preach, Alan. It's definitely a tough one. Even if you feel you're giving up 0.1, 0.2, but if you're not confident on a line, or as you said, it's inconsistent, you could crash it 3 out of 10. Like, maybe it's not worth the risk. And that's where someone like Greg, I think, has been incredible. Loïc, over the years, clearly also just so good at their racecraft. That's their racecraft. So, but when you said excellent, someone like Andy Kolb's run seemed, he just went for excellence. Wasn't that showy? Didn't even look that quick, but he landed himself on the podium as well as Loïc. Looked very impressive at the top, like you said. Did they get their bike set up correct? He always excels in that type of track. And he done some hard work up there, and then he kept it together. But Andy Kolb deserves credit for that style of run. That's who sort of I thought about when you said things like that. You know, you've got Benoît was just unbelievable, deservedly win. Reese was exciting. He was Instagram and going quick. You know, Andy Kolb was like the more consistent, fly under the radar. Loïc Bruni had his title, and then Ronan Dunn was all of those things together. Instagram crashes, going ham, having fun, smile on his face, and he got himself on the podium with the crash. Like it's quite a cool thing. He could say that he might have won the race. Obviously, you'd want that, but if you can't win the race, getting on the podium after having a small tip over, even if it's a quick one, it's pretty cool.
You'll take that.
It is really cool.
Yeah, Andy's.
Yeah, he would take that.
Yeah, and going back to Andy, it's worth sort of giving people a bit of an insight there, because Riley Scott, who's their sort of lines coach, he was in the manager's area, and we've got a monitor in the manager's area so we can watch the live feed, and Riley screen recorded that, so he videoed Benoît's run. So he literally filmed the run on the live screen, filmed the whole run, and then sent that straight to Andy at the top, so Andy could watch that on his warm-up and get the most up-to-date idea on the conditions. And we weren't to know during Benoît's run that was going to be the hot run. But Riley did a great job, and the Athertons did a great job there to have that information passed up to him and say, look, this is the most up-to-date information we can get you. You haven't got access to this without us. And then Andy could see what was running well and what wasn't. And he put in one of those sort of slightly more calculated runs, I think. And although the time gaps weren't that close, you know, in the grand scheme of things, he was right there, him and Reese, a couple of seconds back. But you'll take it, because there was other riders that just looked as they were fish out of water, and it's awful. Who am I to say they're fish out of water in ridiculous conditions and just getting it down there? But we saw certain riders who probably throttled back, and they thought, I'm going to risk more than I'm going to win through this. I'm not comfortable here. I've got the worst of it. I'm just going to get down in one piece. And, you know, if you've got the wrong tires on, or you've got a bad setup and the bike's just doing nothing, if it's all too hard, if they haven't softened everything up enough, then you've got no grip. And I think you're maybe thinking about the bigger picture, or, you know what, my day will come at once and down. Let's just get down and get out of here. So it's like you say, attitude, support from the teams, and try not to. I hope that I can take the brunt of some of the frustration of the things going on instead of the athlete. So I try and, you know, sponge that up, make my point to the organizers or the committees or whoever to say, look, this isn't right. This needs to be better, but not do that in front of the rider. I don't want to bitch and moan in front of a rider. Let's put a smile on my face. Let's do everything we can. Let's support you, you know, and then they feel as though they can just go ride their bike. And I think that's the best a team can do for anyone.
Yeah, well said. That's a great way to do it, is just sort of be the buffer between the frustration and say, yep, that's not great. Let me go handle it with a smile on your face. But that's fascinating that Andy watched the whole run. And I think these are the conditions that pays off. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he watched that run and put that style of run together. It makes total sense. You wouldn't do that in the dry. Like in the dry, riders as a whole, mostly, I stand to be corrected, don't want information.
Yeah, agreed.
They know the speed that they can ride and off they go. But in the wet, I would want to know that where Amaury crashed or that where Loris and Danny crashed. It's like that turn is way slicker than I would have imagined. Cool, I've got information and off we go. So you want information because the conditions were so different. So yeah, watching the broadcast with modern technology and having phones at the top, normally you'd think it's like a distraction. But now it's like you've got to do your best to give the information if you think it's going to be important. And that's an important run to send to someone like, look at the lines he's doing. Look at where he's braking, carrying speed. Okay, you can push there. Whoa, he looked sketchy there. Okay, I'll back it off there. And you can make a plan before you drop in.
Yeah, and I think it's easier to have the rider wants the information. The rider very rarely wants an opinion, because an opinion from myself, they'll be like, well, why? Why are you doing this? Do you not trust I can do this line or that line? And so they do want the information. And if you're going to input something to a rider, you've got to be damn sure that it's worth doing. And with a track like this, I think the Athertons played it really well. What they would have probably done is sent it to his mechanic, and then his mechanic would have said, Ben would have said to him, look, do you want an update on the track? We've got Coulanges, run. I think it's worth you seeing. And then Andy can make a decision. I want that in my brain or I don't. And he's a sensible guy. He said, yeah, let's see it. And then going back to Leger, we had the situation where the rain was coming down in the women's. Everyone was at the top. And I just knew that if you took a certain line, you were going to crash. So I had to just phone Greg and say, you're going to have to trust me on this one, but you must make that change. And it's stressful from a staff point of view. I know that if you're sending information, it's quite easy. Like, hey man, here's the information, you do what you want. But when you have to put your neck on the line, any one of us down the bottom, like, any of the other managers are stressing, have they got the right tires on? Have they got the right goggles? Should I tell them to wear roll-offs? Did we pack the roll-offs? What's going on? And we'd all seen the radars, but in the mountains, what radar is like. It could say you're going to get 5 mil of rain in 30 minutes. And that's happening 100 meters away and you don't see any of it. So it's just preparation, really. I think that's probably the key word is, have you prepared well? Have you done everything you can to put yourself in a position where you can then just go and almost throw caution to the wind and just go, well, let's roll the dice. Let's have some fun. Let's be consistent, but try and enjoy it. Let's try and enjoy it and go from there.
Yeah. I don't want to get too late into the show and not mention Phoebe Gale has had maybe not a season to her standards, even though she's very young. I think that's amazing to see her in third, and then Nina Hoffman and Marine, the experience rounding out the podium there. We've spoken about Myriam, amazing. We've spoken about Valley and the title. Yep. But someone like Phoebe Gale taking advantage of these tough conditions, and putting a run down like that, also really consistent, smart run.
She's
and it's tough as a season. Yeah. And as the season gets going and you're like, wow, there's only 2 races left. I haven't quite got the result I think I'm capable of. That adds a lot of pressure to ride under. So it's nice to see her tick that one off.
I think that was a fantastic run. And I think that, she's been riding well all week. She rides a lot with Tane, and those two seem to get on really well. And in that environment, it's nice. I think Tony must do a very good job of supporting her. If you've got your daughter on the team, it's quite easy to shine the light there and go, well, you're my golden girl, let's go. And maybe leave someone else out without realizing it. But I don't think that happens. I think that she's definitely a core part of that. They ride together really well. I saw some photos from I think Pink Bike where they were both practicing together, and that's really cool. And she's got loads of potential, and I'm glad that she got into the final because she was one of the ones that didn't get the rerun. So she put in the hot time in the wet, and then 9 girls went in front of her in the dry. So you could see how the difference was in time. So for her, it was really good that she got in there because she had the skill and the speed and the preparation for this race. And she did really well. And there's another girl as well, an Australian girl, I think, who I honestly hadn't,
Elise.
she put in a result that I think she should be so proud of, because a full privateer,
Yes.
and for her to come in those conditions, battle through, get to the final, and then just to get yourself in the mix. It's very hard to deliver something, if your first time really at the sharp end of qualifying. It's very, there's not many people up there. It's quite a quiet place.
Oh man, it's lonely,
it's
Alan,
lonely, isn't it?
It's quiet. It's just eerie quiet.
Yeah.
And she's qualified second, right? So
Yeah.
I did make note of that. I said, you know what, that's a really respectable ride. You could argue she maybe could have been a bit tight, or the conditions don't suit her as well, but that's great. She's got 7th in the world.
Exactly.
And I think she did well at Worlds the week before.
She did, exactly
like
that.
She's
on the up and up.
Great.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, look at all this talent. And like you say, remember, we haven't even spoken about it. They lost semi-finals, straight to 10 women, men as well, straight to 30. I don't even know how the protection quite worked. So it was just dramatic and very draining, I think, to get through that week. So every rider should pat themselves on the back.
Yeah, and I think another honourable mention must go to Dominic Platt, because he's come back from an injury. He hasn't had the best of seasons, and not getting into that final. And the same with Kurt McDowell on Norco. If you tell people, by the way, we're going straight to 30, those people that probably would hope to sit top 60, between 30th and 60th, think, oh man, well that's, I've got no chance here. But for them to step up and deliver a run in that, I think Dom qualified 18th, and Kirk out-qualified Greg, which, like, I love that at the dinner table. You want to experience Greg being out-qualified by someone on his team. It's brilliant. So it's nice that he could really get in there and say, hey old man, I'm here. I'm the engineer designing the bike, and I'm, top 25 in the world. I think that is fantastic. So those sorts of riders that had to step up, they didn't have 2 bites of that cherry. They had to do it once and get into the final. And then when you're in the final, you can relax a little bit more, on their side of it. And if you're in the top 20 at the end of the day, brilliant. If you've come down in front of the cameras and you're 25th, again, you're 25th in the world.
So did you notice a bit of that? Obviously, you just mentioned maybe with Kirk you did, and maybe with other riders, maybe even a Gwyn, it's like, well, it's step up or spectate. It's not like, let me see where I'm at, and then you do a chilled run and you get 45th, and you're like, oh goodness, I'm 45th. That's quite tough to get in the top 30 for the semis. Like, how much now I got to push? That was a good run, but now it's like almost like all bets are off. Maybe some of the pressure is off for some guys, like you said.
That's exactly it.
Like the top guys are like, oh, don't make a mistake. It's, I don't have 2 shots at this. And then, well, they don't have 2 shots. They got to do it twice. But yeah, I think it took maybe some pressure off some guys. Like, okay, well, let's just Hail Mary this, and off you go. Like, he's stuck. And there was someone else in the top 10 after quali, obviously different conditions. Those are really amazing rides. Like, they should take confidence from that.
They should. And what you're talking about is one of the difficulties we've got with this 30, because you've got some riders that have protection. You've got some riders that are going for points. You've got some riders that just want to get in the top 30 and they expect to be there, so they have to go consistent. Like Greg treats the qualifying like, I just need to get in. Let me just put down a consistent run, let me get in. And he's at the back end. Charlie, I just need to get in. But then you've got riders like Bernard Kerr who missed the cut because he was maybe a bit too consistent. And you'd never expect that. And, he would have probably, he doesn't want to hear it, but he'd have probably done really well in those conditions. But because it was that one go, you've only got one go at this, and he rode maybe a bit too consistent because he didn't want to crash and throw it away, then all of a sudden you're just the wrong side of 30th. And it is difficult because I think spectators want to see the likes of Bernard riding. He's one of the ones that was clearing the most difficult jump through the ruts in practice. You're never going to think the guy's not going to qualify. But because of how the conditions were shaping up and how they were drying up, the track was getting faster, and all of a sudden everything tightens up. So it's the mindset again. Everyone at this level, you see them ride the bike, and there's very few people you see riding down going, oh, he should be on the track. You don't have that. It's almost, Benoît is one of the riders he's so smooth. he doesn't look exceptional in practice. It's very rare that you look at Benoît and go, well, he's going to blow the doors off it this weekend. You know, when you watch Ronan ride, you're thinking, well, he's going to blow the doors off it because his back wheel's not following his front wheel anywhere. But with Benoît, it's just smooth and he just picks the pace up, and Lucas Shaw picks the pace up. So it's practice. It's a story. You know, the race weekend is a story, and the riders are very good at progressing through it. But, you know, some find themselves sitting out Sunday. And no one, when I talk to people at dinner and you speak to Cube, how was your day? No one in the final. We had to sit out. Madison, how was your day? Matt didn't make the cut. Greg got injured.
Those are some big teams.
Yeah,
man.
It's tough. It really is tough. And I hope that we can find a spot where the big teams can be representing on the Sunday, because I think everyone wants that. We don't want to see, you know, Matt Walker in the 30s and Bernard in the 30s not getting through to the final. That sucks for everyone, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, on the stories, it was Matteo
Iniguez
that got through and got 19th, and it's like, that's a story. We get to speak about that. I like to see, how's he going to do? That's a lot of pressure being in the top 10 near the end. He handled it pretty decently, you know, and is stuck 8th. That's a story, you know. And then there's some rounds where he's not in the top 30, but we can't see him in the final.
There you go.
Know? And some guys are 8, and like you say, there's like, it's all about their strategy as well as the mental game. And it's tough when you're not protected, that your strategy is forced upon you sometimes. It's a lot more to deal with if you're not protected, or it's a lot more to deal with if you're coming off an injury and there's only 30 spots. So yeah, it certainly is a challenge. And those are some big teams you mentioned, and that's the compromise I've been vocal about. That's the positive compromise I'm hoping for, is more people in the final. Doesn't have to be a crazy amount, but I think we've proved that maybe. Oh, and Win Masters did the video. So, you know, I think it was overwhelming. There was maybe 2 out of the 15 that got asked, plus I've polled, that said maybe 30 is a good number. And everyone else, including Gwyn, who's a top rider, said probably 40 is a good number or better. We need more. Let's try. Let's compromise. Let's figure it out. So yeah, that's what I heard. You know, so it's not just my opinion being vocal.
No, I'm the same. I if you ask me, I think for me, 40's the number. Like motocross race, you know, you get the top 40 to qualify. You can come, you can try. You're in the top 40. You're not. Good luck next weekend. You're in the top 40. You make the May. So, you know, and had that last chance to qualify.
And it's kind of a cool story, right? Like it ties into the changes and the how the sport's evolving. It's somehow evolved to this 30-man thing or for broadcast, but it's like, okay, we'll keep the number 30, but we'll just add 10 on this super exciting LCQ or qualifying 2. And like, you know, it's maybe that's like just the one compromise you guys are hoping for, but it's not my fight. I'm just at home. I've had some really cool chats, and I honestly agree with a lot more than I used to, because when you have a long form conversation like this, Alan, we could agree to disagree on some points, but I certainly see where you're coming from. And I can certainly go, I actually see the longevity of that point could work. Maybe we could get there a different way. That's my disagreement. But hey, like, let's go carry on with our lives. Like, we're all trying to put the sport on a good pedestal, you know, like, because we all think it could be more mainstream. The organizers, as well as us, as well as the teams, as well as the riders, like everyone's on the same team. That's the problem here. But without the communication, it seems like everyone's pushing and pulling instead of going, okay, how do we get on the same boat, go down the same river, and figure it out, you know?
Yeah, I think we all just want this. We love the sport. Everyone here is so passionate about this sport. We get up very early in the morning and we work late till night just because we love doing it. And, you know, Wyn's such an advocate of the sport, and he's very passionate about it, and he's very passionate about the riders. And talking of Wyn and his privateer award, he's a big backer of the privateer. Let's not lose the privateer. Let's tell the story of the privateer, because it's an important story to tell. And, you know, you link Wyn's perspective and viewpoint and drive with the broadcaster, and you say, hey, talk about this privateer, talk about the fact he's not on a big team, talk about the fact that he's pitting out of a rental car. It's not a negative. You know, it shouldn't be seen as a negative. It should be seen as a stepping stone to the future. This is the next guy. this is the guy you need to...
Yeah, like David versus Goliath.
Yeah, this is the guy you need to be backing. This is the guy the fans need to get behind. This is the guy that should win a privateer award and give him, €1,000 to help him with his petrol. But unfortunately, third place got just over €1,000. This is the problem, that these are the things that I could bang about all day, and I'm not the guy shaking the money tree. I do understand that, but I just hope that we don't just... Let's not compare ourselves to bloody Formula One, if I'm honest with you, because we're not there. That we're not being paid by the organizer to turn up. We're literally paying for the privilege of our actors starring in their show. And that to me is a bit twisted, I don't understand how this works, but in my mind, if you are making instead of 8 rounds, you're making an 8-part film, and you were the producer of this 8-part film, and you're saying, we only want the very best actors in our film, you'd reach out to the agents and you say, look, this is what we're offering your actor to be in our film. We're going to pay them this amount of money. And then the producer's making the money off the show that they sell. And at the moment, we're the ones paying for the privilege of starring on someone's show. And therefore, I think we need that. Everyone's in it together. Let's try and make it better. And a big part of that is the next generation coming through. And a big part of that is those who are the late bloomers, who've come from nothing, who are pitching out of the rental car, but are still able to mix it with the world's best. And that tells a story that people will want to watch.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking about how many sports, like when the commentators talk about the rags to riches story, or the underdog, or the guy that's in golf Monday qualified in, and then he's in the leaderboard, or he's an amateur sponsors invite, and he's mixing it up with the Rory McIlroy and the Tiger Woods. You're like, come on,
there
dude.
You go.
Yeah,
there
Rory can win the next one. You go, boy. So the Loughlin's,
there you go. Lockheed's exactly that.
Ollie Davis now on a factory ride, but almost wasn't, but he can mix it up. And I'm like, those are cool stories. And I also agree with the organizers and other people that there are too many people at a World Cup. So let's relook at the point structure and the feeder series. Let's get that sorted and maybe not rush all the changes. My other little 2 cents, but we don't want to harp on too much. I'm like, it can all work.
Yeah.
We must maybe just get the order of it right and work together. And like you said, there's so many cool stories. You don't want to lose a story.
No, you don't.
And of course, the race winners coming out of the top 20, 10 qualify. If you give them enough runs, yes, we understand that.
But this is it.
It is a cool story. Dom Platt, they mentioned it. First time in the final this year. You're like, okay, I've got emotion.
Yeah.
Can he do well?
Yeah.
Elise, don't really know much about it. Did well at Worlds. Wow, she qualified second.
Yep.
That's cool. That's a story. There's emotion behind it,
Yeah, maybe the TV crews will go around to see those 2 riders before Monster Anne. Hey, let's have a bit of a soundbite. How are you doing? What are you looking forward to show the viewer? I'm to give you a bit of an update. I'm sat on the high street in Loudenvielle in a very fancy hotel. I have to say, in the bar. What I'd love to see is the morning after the race. Why can't the managers be here with the organisers? Let's sit down. Let's have a coffee. Let's go through what happened. Let's try and propose something for the next race. Let's try and make it a little bit better. And it's always better in person. We don't need to be sending long emails that can sound impersonal or rude or impolite. You want it to be. I'm coming from a place of love. I want this. Let's try and come together and make this a better thing.
Hear that,
and
sure.
if you're sat around having a coffee with someone, you can agree to disagree. And then in a long form conversation, you can agree to disagree. If I send someone a WhatsApp and it sounds a bit snappy, they're not going to engage with me. They're just going to be like, Milway's a dick. And I get that. I get that a lot, unfortunately. But
I'm literally dealing with that now. Like an out of context, someone reading into tone, it's blown so far out. I'm like, whoa. The goal was to get on a phone call.
Yeah.
And maybe in person is even better. The number one prize. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. I've learned some valuable lessons, and it's a lot of energy wasted. And I'm sure you guys on the communication, you might get that on the managers groups and all that quick text schedule change. You're like, oh my goodness, that was quick. Someone's like, how can you send that? And then it's like you've lost the whole way of communicating. So yeah, I hear you. That's a perfect world. That's positive. I hope for that. People are busy, and yeah, but I mean, it's just come back to a fascinating race. I got so much respect for all the riders, from the privateers to the factory teams to the organizers, everyone dealing with it in the rain and cold and wet and stress. Like, that's why we got a show here to talk about, Alan. So I really appreciate your time, and maybe we wind it down a little bit on that positive note of like, they're in it for the right reasons. I can see they want the sport to grow. Grow is this interesting word, but we're happy with that if it's hopefully includes the right people and the right parties. I guess have a voice.
Absolutely, and I'm super excited to keep moving forward, and super excited for Mont St. Anne. I can't wait to get out there. Again, I think we're preparing for mixed conditions. I don't think snow's out of the question. Mont St. Anne in October. It's going to be cold. It's going to be wet. We're trying to get ahead of the game. I picked up some more goggles from Oakley to prepare and get ready for the flight. So all of these things we're excited for. We don't mind it at all. And, the long haul flights add another element. We can't take our big truck with us. It's going to level things a little bit more. We're going to have to, what do we need? What don't we need? I'm trying to go through that stuff now with Tom and make sure that we've got all the bits that we do need. And I'm going to head to the truck on Wednesday to go through it. So we don't stop, it's all preparation, but it's brilliant. Like, how much fun is that, having to go to the racetrack on a Wednesday and dig through the bits that I'm going to take with me to Canada? I can't complain.
Yeah, and then the accountants praying,
the excess
crossing
baggage.
all fingers and toes that the excess baggage isn't gnarly. There's been some stories. I got a whole book of excess baggage stories, and most teams do. And yeah, that's a tough one. But Alan, I'm sure we missed many notable rides, and if anyone listens that are riders, thanks for listening. We appreciate what you do. We can't get through everyone, but if there's anything else, Alan, you let me know.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm always interested when people feedback and tell me what I missed on this, or what they think a good point I made or a bad point I made, because it's part of the conversation. So yeah, it's always good to hear people's feedback. And I know we get comments and messages from this, and I look forward to them. And it's always good to chat with you, mate. It's a pleasure.
No, I appreciate it. I had the funniest comment. Someone said they really enjoyed the show with Sven. Big thumbs up. But we seem to have been butting in a lot less and not talking over each other, which he was very disappointed with. I was like, but the other guy said we do it too much. I'm like, oh, I can't please everyone. I was like, you know what? We'll bring that back.
We'll bring it back.
We'll bring back the banter. We need to bring all three of us together. Maybe Mount St. Anne might be a bit tough, but maybe after the season, or once some of the rule changes have been announced. But Crank Brothers, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to get Alan. We wouldn't be able to get Win. We wouldn't be able to get Sven. And to say thanks to you listeners, you lucky subscribers, hopefully, you are going to get 25% off on site on a pedal and shoe combo. You just have to put Moving the Needle code in there on the Crank Brothers site. So that's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Alan, he's not paying too much attention because he is an ambassador of Crank Brothers. He gets stuff for free, but he works his arse off for it. So good for him. And I'm waiting for my new shoes to arrive, the new color combo that they're going to send. So I'm stoked on that. And then I will announce the winner of the podcast giveaway, because I saw all the awesome comments. There's only 2 rules. You got to be a subscriber of the YouTube channel so you can see my ugly face and old handsome Alan, and follow the podcast Instagram. I'm going to announce it before Mount St. Anne. So thanks to everyone. This has been your Crank Brothers race review. I've harped on enough. 14 years in a row. They got all the podium spots at Loudenvielle. There's something about those pedals. Till the next one. Peace.
Thank you.